All right, today we are talking about fire weather. What type of weather is conducive to wildfires? Now here in Iowa, we don't really have the wildfires you see, the typical ones out west where, they have a lot of forests. It gets really dry in that part of the country. We don't really have that sort of a deal, but we do have 2 times a year when we can have our own sort of wildfires. Once every fall, when you have a lot of cropland that dries out, a lot of brush, grassland and so on that gets dry by that time of the year and can light up easily. And then the second season, if you want to call it that, comes along in the spring when you have that same crop stubble and brush and things like that that is still pretty dry before we start to green up in the spring months. Now when we talk specifically about fire weather, one of the biggest things we're talking about, or at least parameters we're talking about, is relative humidity. Now we don't talk about this very much in meteorology, or at least on the weather very much in the forecast, because it's kind of complicated, because it's relative. It's not just the measure of how much moisture you have in the air, it's the measure of how much moisture you have in the air relative to the temperature. So I'll give you an illustration here. You have some moisture in the air, it's 50 degrees, the relative humidity is about 80%. Well, now we have the same amount of moisture in the air, but we ramp up the temperature, and now our relative humidity has dropped all the way down to 28%. Different relative humidity, same amount of water in the air, but the air is emptier, it's drier out there now. That's kind of what we're looking at. When we look at relative humidity and fire risk, basically relative humidity tells us how fast fuel, so your dry grasses, brush and everything else, how fast those dried out vegetation can get dry and become fuel for any fires that get out of control. And when we do have real high fire risks from the weather conditions, you might see something like this on the map. This is a red flag warning. That's kind of the highest level warning that the National Weather Service puts out for fire danger. You usually see it on a map as this real bright, hot pink color. There's some specific criteria that come for a red flag warning. That relative humidity we talked about, we have to be forecasting relative humidities around or below 25%, at least in our part of the country. And you have to have winds, or at least frequent gusts, above 25 miles per hour. And of course it goes without saying, it needs to be a dry time of the year. We have sometimes dry air in the summer months, but usually the grass is green, the crops are green, everything like that, so we don't have much of a high fire risk. So usually it's during your fall and spring months that your vegetation is dry. And these conditions need to be happening or expected within the next 24 hours. So if there is a red flag warning or any kind of elevated fire risks any time of year, it goes without saying, don't be burning things outside if you absolutely don't have to. Don't burn your brush. In the fall, that means, burning leaves, not a great idea. In the spring, doing any kind of controlled burns or things like that. Burning trash is not a great idea either. Burn barrels, and likewise, carefully discard of your cigarettes, matches, and things like that. Don't want those things to accidentally light up something. And then be careful with any outdoor equipment, especially, for example, farm fields in the fall time. Harvest especially, a lot of fires that start in the fall out in the fields start because of equipment, combines, tractors, and so on that get hot, and they've got a little bit of some dust and everything around them, and that can spark fires as well. So whenever you have hot, dry conditions in the fall and the spring, you got to be careful and watch out for fires that can spread quickly when those winds get strong and can easily get out of control.